Who are we really? Let's explore this question with a commitment to uncovering and empowering interpretation for ourselves. And interpretation leaves us being and acting effectively in life. And for whatever leadership project you may have, it is critical to the being of a leader and effective actions of leadership. This trip is going to get dark.
So you're here to save the world.
I'm trying to free your mind, Neo, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through.
And ugly before light. Light as in the word enlightenment. So fasten your seatbelt. It's not personal. We're all in this together.
Do you want to know what it is?
You have to see it for yourself.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. Take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
My default eye. I innocently turned the eye-level doorknob to my parents' bedroom door and walked in to discover them in the midst of an intimate adult moment. They moved faster than I had ever seen before. I was shocked and knew there was something terribly wrong. I immediately turned around, closed the door, and in that moment I became separate from my previously safe and secure world. I needed a strategy to deal with my break in belonging. In the magical thinking of a 5-year-old child, I arbitrarily concluded that if I had only known, that would have not happened. So I need to know everything so I don't get caught like that again. My illusion included that it would fix this break in belongings, so my life became about figuring out everything. This is a picture of me already at 7 years old. To this day, I have not stopped, and this is part of what I'm doing here, making sure that you also know everything, so you don't have to suffer the embarrassment and humiliation of surprise events that could be prevented by simply knowing everything. Besides, I'm a nice guy. There's other events that shape our lives, like the time I was winning all the prizes at my birthday party. It was my dartboard, and I could beat everyone, so why not? Well, my mother bent down and discreetly whispered in my ear, "Let them win." I was mortified and embarrassed, and from that day on, I made sure people around me always won. I became a nice guy. In high school, I could have gone on to be state champion in wrestling. Of course, I knew everything about it and used exotic pinning combinations the others had never heard of, such as the guillotine and the figure 4 grapevine. But my best friend was in my weight class, and his father was the coach, and it wouldn't be very nice if I didn't let him win. Same thing with a girl I liked in grade school. I knew Patsy liked my friend Jack. I gave Jack the confidence and encouragement he needed. I stood aside as my beautiful redhead crush faded into the sunset. There were many other times, but since I'm so nice, I won't bother you with them. One last notable event happens when we are on our own. The moment we realize no one is going to be there to bail us out, pay the bills, take care of things. Maybe they would, but nevertheless, it seems like it is all on my shoulders now. I put together that I'm going to have to do things myself, all alone. No cavalry is coming, and I am where the buck stops. I become the proverbial Lone Ranger. What happened was I got my high school sweetheart pregnant during my first year in college, and since, as we already have established, I know what is to be done, and being a nice guy, we ran away to get married. I even had to figure out how to accomplish this while being underage. To spare you the soap operatic details, which are many and make an interesting story, my drama here is not the point. I became a figure-it-out, nice guy that does it by himself. Smart, nice, alone. That's the way I wound up being. As you may have guessed, I have figured it out for all of us. Being the nice guy that wound up being, I admit, I didn't do it all by myself, which is a shortcoming I will endure for your sake. We all do this. We were all too small, not enough, and didn't belong once upon a time. You don't have to believe me now, but just watch. We all have made compensations for being too small, not enough, and not belonging, and then we forgot that we did that. The good news is all you have to do is look around your life to figure out who you became by your ideals, habits, possessions, friends, education, and so on. In my case, I happen to have a degree in organic chemistry. Obviously, useful to figure out the physical world, then a master's in social work from the top social work school in the country. So now I'm figuring out the psychological world. I then called on physicians to convince them to prescribe certain psychoactive pharmaceuticals. I worked in the lab at Mallinckrodt, Monsanto, now Bayer, and I own a construction company where I do nearly all the work myself. But while the guys were working, I was off getting trained in transformational technologies. What else would you expect out of a know-it-all, figure-it-out nice guy doing things by himself? I have studied, figured out, people enough to know how they wound up being. But before we get into all of that, it is supremely critical and immensely important, right? I can't emphasize this enough. To know that the knowing it all, figure it out, being nice, and doing it by myself compensations do not fix my breaks in belonging. In fact, not only do they not cure them, I just do it more because that is all I know to do. If you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, as they say. Then, the bigger the breaks in belonging become, because they aren't being fixed by my strategies, it calls upon me to use more of my compensation, spiraling on and on, larger and larger, with no real relief. To make matters more tortuous and convoluted, since my brain knows how to survive in a world where I have figured things out, be nice, and do it alone, my brain creates a reality in which it can use those compensations, since it would not know how to survive in a world where I don't need those encoded neuronal responses. Our brain's job is to make sure we survive, period. When it comes to survival, it will sacrifice love, compassion in a heartbeat. It's not automatically encoded to go to love and caring when there is a threat, and the whole world is a threat to be compensated for. For now, I ask that you assume this is valid. In a later video, I will prove this point. Every once in a while, we confront this bankrupt approach and have a meltdown, become unhinged, use psychoactive agents, drink or drug, do a Forrest Gump run, or worse. A few of us are lucky and we manage to work through it or get some serious assistance from others. We can all see this in other people. We just can't see it in ourselves very well. We become obsessed over our physical beauty, how big our house is, how manicured the lawn is, how much social traction our transportation accrues, our work position, social status, prestige, education, and whatever else to gain admiration that we use to compensate in a world where we're too small, not enough, and don't belong. We try to belong, and we delude ourselves that it's working, hardly noticing that it's not working since we are so heavily invested in this bankrupt path. In our not being able to acknowledge that it doesn't work, we ultimately doom ourselves to the hamster wheel of life. The expression comes from somewhere, and it is celebrated in the movie Groundhog Day. We judge others for being so shallow, which is but a mere reflection of our own futility. We begrudge the ones that are just a little bit too high on the ladder for somehow not belonging. We have a bit more tolerance for those that have similar pursuits, status, and ideals as we do, and you still know what we say behind their backs. Okay, I admit I'm being harsh to make a point. If we can rub our noses in it, it will provide a bigger opening later. If we defend against it, that is simply more of what I just distinguished. Of course, we all belong. We just have no experience of it. We all do the same stupid shit, and that makes us more alike than is apparent. We are all confronted with the same debacle, and the harder we try to get out, the more estranged we are to ourselves and others. Let's do an experiment to put a fine point on this. Escaping the point just ensures more of the same disempowering, stuck, survival-ish ways of being. So, in our experiment to drive the point home, pick an example from the ways in which we wound up being, to borrow a term of art from the Being a Leader course 2009. Let's say we consider ourselves to be our beauty, attractiveness, sexiness. Now, what happens when we get older? At some point, this will likely have to be confronted. If you are your beauty and you're no longer the stereotypical looker, a 10, that is a problem, and we are left disempowered. Our self disintegrates if we consider ourselves to be our beauty. Let's take our intelligence. At some point, we aren't as sharp as we used to be, and those other smart people around us are leaving us in the dust. Our chess ELO score falls and we're done. Or, once you reach the top, like Bobby Fischer did, that false self disintegrates. We can map this onto any way we wound up being. Pick any one of yours. If you can't see yours, use someone else's that you can see, and discover for yourself that any way of being that we put together to compensate for being too small, not enough, and not belonging, and we all did it, whether you know how you did it or not, you will end up self-disintegrating as long as you consider yourself to be those things you identify with that you put together unwittingly as a child. Some of us have reached extraordinary pinnacles. This explains why it is not satisfying, although it sure seems like it should be. The rest of us suffer while trying to make it, and our life is used up in the process. Okay, well done if you can let yourself sink into the unworkableness of that abyss, of the ways we put together to survive. So now what? And, by the way, we will never stop using these strategies, except for one exception, which we will be covering after we put in a few more fundamental elements. Better to say, it is not going to stop using you anytime soon. Trying to get out is just as much of a trap. Just own it, embrace it, share it with others as I have done. There's nothing wrong, although it may seem like it. Our being authentic about it actually winds up being endearing and is one of the 4 foundational elements of being a leader and the effective exercise of leadership. There's one thing that will work to empower us in the face of these scripted ways of surviving. We can constitute ourselves as a kind of self that will not disintegrate. This will empower ourselves in creating another possibility, a transformed self. In this YouTube playlist, I have laid it out from several different directions, so it's difficult to not get. It is worth mastering and is yet so straightforward and simple. In our inquiry into who are you, who am I, or me, who am me, what is a self, to leave us empowered, there are still a few more distinctions to draw, which are on the drawing board. So stay tuned. Your input is very important and requested. While I would like to think my nice figure it out all by myself self, it's not going to work so well. A spoiler alert. The one exception that will leave us empowered involves being up to something bigger than ourselves. It will cost us these ways we wound up being. It's obvious I can't do this alone and will need your genius too. If you are still here, I acknowledge you for the courage to confront our humanity. It's not pretty. Well, at least not yet anyway. If you make the choice, you are part of the team.